Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Mama Tales. As always, I'm super thankful that you've taken the time to be here. It's so amazing getting all this feedback and watching you guys enjoy the podcast. You really make it worthwhile. Last episode, I mentioned that I was having an issue listing this podcast on Apple, but I was able to resolve that issue, or rather it resolved itself. So the podcast is now up on more places. You can find it on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcast, among many other platforms. You can find a very good breakdown of where it's available on the website link. I'll leave that link at the description of this podcast, but you can also find it on my Insta bio. My Instagram is at @salimugore. That's probably the best way you can communicate to me right now. But wherever you are, wherever you get your podcasts from, if you just search for Mama Tales, you should be able to see this podcast. So subscribe, follow, so you can be alerted on new episodes. And if you can, leave a review. I think this is mostly for just like the Apple side of things, but yes, leave a review. I think it helps in the ratings and things like that. For all the moms out there, I hope you had a great Mother's Day. Mine was interesting to say the least, but in a good way. So earlier on in the week, my husband, he took a delivery and he told me that our neighbor needed him to hide it for his wife so that he'll just come and pick it up on Sunday. So Sunday comes through, and then my husband left the house to supposedly get my gift, and then he called me when he was out and told me that the neighbor was coming for his package. I went with my baby to the room, picked it and brought it closer to the door, so when he knocks, I just give it to him. I waited for so long for this guy to come pick up his gift, but he never did. So my husband walked in through the door with this big bouquet of flowers, which was so beautiful. And then he tells me that the gift I've been keeping safe for my neighbor was mine all along. I felt bamboozled there. I was just like, are you serious? Anyway, so we open it and it's a beautiful painting. It's an abstract piece of art that has many faces of women, and I think it was really great because it just also showed the many faces, or rather hats, I put on a day-to-day basis. So it was a great celebration of that fact. I think I'll share the artist's name or handle down below so you can see her work, but I don't know how I'd share a picture of it, so maybe I'll do it on Insta. I'll see. But it was a really great gift. The other thing that happened that day, so we were having some family over. They came to see the baby and do this ceremony that we have in our culture called Goshogia Mwana. It just means, I think it's been translated very roughly to baby catching. So where the aunties and the older women in the family come to just bless the child. So of course with like COVID and things like that, I wasn't really sure it was going to happen. I'd already had one with one side of the family and it was virtual, so I thought this one would be as well. It was virtual, but there was like a crew that came as well, around 5 guys. So I thought that was still doable. We did it. First of all, they brought me another big bouquet of flowers that were really good. They're still displayed around the house. But then they brought something that sent me to tears. Like I literally cried. So what they did was that they presented us with a beautiful piece of art again. But then this one was like a pencil sketch of a picture I'd sent them. They asked me for a picture of Keo all alone. So there was a time when she was 5 months and height of COVID and things like that, we'd bought dresses for this girl. She'd never worn them. She'd never left this house with any of them. So that day I put a dress on her. I even put a bow on her head. Like we went all out and all we did was just like a little mini photo shoot in our bedroom. So yes, this was one of those pictures. She's smiling because now she'd really got a hang of the smiling. She's sitting down as well. And she was trying to grab my phone. So you can see her like extend her hand out to grab the phone. They commissioned this beautiful piece and it just threw me. Oh my God, I cried. So you can see a lot of this person's work. I think it's called The Pencil Master. I'll also link that down below. So all in all, it was such a fulfilling day. I was tired by the end of it. It was filled with love and pride for my baby. I do intend, however, to also gift myself a mani-pedi. It's crazy that now mani-pedis are gifts, because before I used to do them monthly. But I haven't had one in what I would want to say a year. I think I probably sneaked one in around my birthday, but I've never done it again. So it's also good that as moms we look out for ourselves. So I think I'll try and squeeze in some time to do that. Today, as I'm recording this on Sunday, 16th of May, is my baby's first birthday. So yes, I've woken up in the morning to record this. I'm so excited. We are one. So yesterday spent the day gathering some supplies and started decorating the house because we're not having a huge bash really. We're just hosting our parents and siblings in the house for just a lunch. I think I wanted to also go a little bit as overboard as I can get. It's not intense, to be quite honest. Just a few balloons here. I'm really proud to be able to be doing this for the very first time. And then since she's still not old enough to tell me exactly what she wants, I can just basically do what I want. The other thing that I'm doing immediately after I record this podcast is bake her a cake. I have commissioned a cake by this very, very great baker. I've already eaten some of his cakes. His handle is Oka Means Bake. He was once a contestant on the Great Kenyan Bake Off. So I'm really excited for that cake. But in addition to that cake, I'm making another cake. And this one just basically, it's good for Keo. So she hasn't really eaten sugar before. And I know cakes can be full of sugar. So I'm making her own sugar-free cake. Just sweeten it with like bananas. She loves bananas. So bananas, I wish it was mango season. Then it would have been a mango cake. And then some berries. It will be like a smash cake as well. Morothi doesn't like the idea of a smash cake. He calls it very, very Western. I don't disagree. I don't know where that thing came from, but I want to see what she'll do. But I have a very, very, very sneaking suspicion that she won't smash that cake. She'll just point at it and just slowly eat it because that's what she does anyway. So we'll see what she does with this cake, but it's also a really good one that us ourselves can eat, especially like aparos if they're not into sugary cake. It's also an option. And then I'll tell you all about the bash next time. So last time I left the story at the point where I was just about to give birth. So this episode will talk about what that last month looked like, my labor experience, my birthing experience, and a bit of postpartum, getting into the fourth trimester. So it might be a little bit long, but I didn't feel like I wanted to split this one as well. Like I said, I was just about to give birth. A pandemic was declared in Kenya and the first lockdown was imposed. So there was the 7 p.m. curfew. That time the roads were very empty. I remember going for walks and it looked emptier than a public holiday morning, if that makes any sense, or a Sunday morning. It was really, really, really empty because that time everyone was scared, right? So I remember just going out and just being hit by that reality. So that last month, so we're talking about like mid-April to May, I was really, really tired of being pregnant because the other thing that happened is just like, I feel like my belly just exploded and boom, this baby has just grown. And then the other thing about like the lockdown and everything is that my husband was now fully at home. So I loved that fact. So I'd always wanted to do a bump shoot, but I couldn't. I think the whole rules around that were very muddled at that exact moment. So I thought it might be a little bit irresponsible of me to, go to a studio, get exposed, or even expose people. So I let go of that fact. So what happened is that we did an at-home shoot, but now unfortunately, you can't have, we didn't figure out how to have both of us in one frame. Oh yeah. But we took really great pictures. Actually, the picture that's on this podcast's cover art was extracted from one of the pictures that I took during that at-home baby shoot. Also, a few days to my due date, I had a surprise baby shower. Also, it's one of the things that I didn't think would actually happen because of this pandemic. But my friends organized a drive-through. I was very, very sure that no one would be able to surprise me for this one. But they pulled off something. Because what happened that day is that I think I kind of had a feeling something was going to happen this day because Mauricio was always on the phone, and then he told me that we were going to walk at Arboretum. We tend to do that a lot, so I was just like, okay, I guess. So we go to Arboretum, get to the parking lot, and then it's like, nope, now we have to go home. So in my mind, what I thought is that, okay, fine, maybe we were leaving so that guys come into the house and decorate and do whatever. But now I started getting anxiety because I'm this hosting person. So now that there are people in my house, now I'll have to host them. I have to figure out how to make sure that they're comfortable and things like that. So I didn't really like that idea. Anyway, so we get home, and then he doesn't put the car in the house, in the compound. We just parked outside, and now it's just weird. We're just sitting in the car chilling. I tell myself, just let it happen. Definitely there's something happening now, so you're not going to be surprised. So I just told him, is this the baby shower? And he just, amused me a little bit here and there. But then all of a sudden I saw my friends drive by with like signs and posters out of their doors. So we got out of the car. It was really cute. Like we were separated by a road, but they were on the other side of the road with these beautiful posters, telling me congratulations and all that. They had gifts that a few of them crossed the road with and placed them in our car. A beautiful cake as well. So we got in the house and then had a virtual one in the evening. So one of my friends also brought like decorations, put them on the wall to serve as my backdrop as we had this virtual one. It was a really, really great thing. I love my friends. Thank you guys so much for that one. It was definitely unexpected. Back to this thing. My mother-in-law decided to come over to help us out when the baby comes. We still had the area locked down, right? So she couldn't just drive into Nairobi. So had to get like a doctor's note and smuggle her way through the borders. Oh man, it was crazy. So I already felt like she'd done so much to be there. So I really hoped that my baby wouldn't be late. And I wouldn't end up feeling like I'm wasting her time. I know it's just a crazy thought, but that's how I felt, that pressure of like, oh man, she's come all this way. There's nothing I can do to like make this process go any faster. So due date comes. I think my due date was the 10th of May. So comes and there's no sign of baby. I'd already scheduled an appointment with my gynae at that time. So we went, talked to her, and then she was like, okay, so maybe what we'll do is let me examine you, see if anything is happening, and then did a membrane sweep. It's someone trying to, if this is the right description, trying to go around the rim of the cervix to just try and help things move along. It's hella painful and uncomfortable, but it was a great introduction to what would be happening that day that I'm in labor. So it's also supposed to induce labor. At that time, when she checked, I had not dilated at all. So what we did was just set a date for induction just in case. That week, I think we just got into a rabbit hole of trying to figure out how to induce labor. Man, I walked so much and I was so tired. I could barely walk. After 20 meters is a lot and I would just have to stop. I ate so many pineapples. The way they tell you pineapples induce labor. I love pineapples. It's one of my favorite fruits. But that week, got to a point, I didn't want to see any pineapple near me. Man, so I was so anxious. I think I would spend my day bouncing on my yoga ball. Again, something that should help induce labor. As I tried to put together a jigsaw puzzle. I think that's all I did every single day. I also went offline. I don't want to check my messages. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Social media was full of like COVID stuff and scares, and that just upped the ante in terms of like the anxiety that I was feeling and all of that. So I would rarely ever look at my phone. I think there was even a time I just kept it on airplane mode. I didn't want to see. I just focused on the jigsaw puzzle because that's the only thing that I could control. So I remember that week, every little pain that I had, like even the slightest groan, made everyone jump. They'd be like, oh, is it now? Is it now? So it reached a point where I started just keeping these things to myself. I even promised that if I was to just start getting labor pains or contractions, I would not say anything until I was very, very sure that was what was happening. It was quite an interesting week. Sometimes I would be very, very comfortable and walk like I don't have this huge baby inside of me or trying to press her way out. And sometimes I couldn't walk. I would stand up, take a few steps, and I just could not because of the pain and pressure that was happening in my pelvis. So it was quite a tiring week. However, at the end of it, that's when things started moving. Also, I'll just put this here. I don't think I did anything specific to induce labor. I don't believe in all that stuff in as much as I tried it, because sometimes I'm like, how do I just know? Or rather, how do I figure that it was because of the things that I did that got me into labor, as opposed to that the time had just reached? I think it was a Saturday. I'm not completely sure. So I was sitting in the sitting room with my mother-in-law watching some 9 p.m. news. And then I felt a warm trickle. So what I did was just stand up, went to the loo to check what's going on. And since I couldn't see anything, I just put on a pad so that I'd be able to, if it happens again, but catch it and I'll be able to know what it is. So I went back to the living room. A few minutes later, I felt it again. So I just decided to tell my mom-in-law that I'm going to sleep so that I can be able to just go through all these things with my husband in the room. So I go and check it out and I see definitely this isn't like my regular discharge, something very, very different. So yeah, so I see that and I'm like, all right, this could be my water breaking. We'd gone to bath class and I'd been taught how to identify how the fluid looks like or smells like. So it's supposed to be sweet, supposed to be clear. So mine wasn't necessarily that clear. It had a little bit of a yellow tinge, but I wasn't too worried about that at that exact moment. But I think what was happening is that I was just too excited that this thing is happening. So you remember the way I said I wouldn't tell anyone? I went and told my husband. I couldn't hide it. And then when I told him, he just panicked and he was like, no, I'm lying. I'm like, how can I lie? Kept asking me if I'm really, 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 really sure. I'm like, I think that's what's happening. I think my water is breaking. And no sooner than I said that or realized this fact, then I started getting contractions. I noticed this because I was already hyper aware. So I noticed some pain coming in every 15 to 20 minutes. So that time I told him for sure this is happening. So it was just like, okay, let's not jump again. Let's try and sleep. So I attended bath class instructed by this amazing lady called Lucy from Total Care Box. She had done a really great job at helping us figure out how to labor well at home. So that's what I was really, really prepared to do. So I tried to sleep because I knew that I'll need as much energy as I can. So I couldn't sleep, either the excitement or the pain. I just couldn't do it. So I just woke up and, tried to go through the things, or rather the exercises that I'm supposed to be doing to help labor along. I think I was too eager, to be quite honest. So by midnight, the pain had intensified, but it was still manageable. I kept leaking throughout the entire time. I called my gyna. She told me to hold on. It could be something different, so nothing crazy is happening. I was like, let me not think too hard about it. Again, I couldn't sleep, so I went to the sitting room. My husband followed me. The contractions died down. I'm like, I think it's one of those false ones again. I'm a little bit disappointed, but there's nothing really I can do about it. So 4 a.m. 5 started dozing off, and I remember at 6 a.m. I was woken up by a gush of water. Now it wasn't like too much water, but it was more than I had released before then. So I tried getting up from the couch because I did not want to ruin it. I didn't want to ruin the couch. Those are the things I was thinking about. And Fana hears me and he's just like, I guess it's time to call the gyna again. So I call her and she tells us that, it seems like your water has broken now. I tell her the color of it. It's a little bit tinged. She's like, okay, so what would happen is that you need to go to the hospital to get checked out. So I'm like, okay, fine. But I'm in no rush because my goal here, because I don't think I've talked about it before, and also the reason I went to bath class is that I wanted to labor as much as I could in the house and only go to hospital to deliver. So when she said I had to go to Hosi, I was really hoping that I would go and then just get sent back. That's what happens. I've had that so many times that you go and then you're not progressed far enough and then they send you back home. So I was in no particular rush to go to the hospital because again, I thought I would just be coming back home. I ate a very full breakfast. Actually, I think I even had dinner for breakfast at this point because, maximum energy, right? So we'd already packed our bags before. We just put them. Actually, I think they were already in the car. We never took them out. So I just changed. And this time, I don't think I had contractions. They had died down completely. So you see, I was very, very convinced that I will go and I'll be told to come back home. So in my bath plan, so I had labor, what do you call them? Labor helping tools. That's the worst word. Things that would help me through labor. So for example, my yoga ball was a big thing. So I remember when we were going that time, I'd forgotten it. So I was just like, but I'm coming back. So it's fine. We'll deal with that later. So we got to hospital at around, I think it was 9:30 a.m. I could even tell that my gyna was a little bit frustrated that I took that much time. So as he works on the paperwork, they check me. So they're doing the internal checks and I'm 3 centimeters dilated. I feel great because that's progress. However, when they checked like the fluid it was still continually leaking, they found that it had a little bit of meconium in it. So what meconium is, it's like the baby had pooped a little in their tummy. I don't know if it was a little or a lot, but she had pooped. And it was still not too much to be very alarming. But what it did is that it put a timer on me. So she recorded the night before, when I'd started, in the first event of that leaking happened at 9 p.m. as the start of this timer. So what happened is that I had another 12 hours. Because ideally, after your water breaks, to reduce the risk of infection, that baby has to be delivered in a 24-hour period. So my timer started and I felt that pressure, but not too much again, because I felt 12 hours is a lot. Surely the baby would have to be here. So I start packing my bags up to leave. And this nurse looks at me. She's like, chick, you're admitted. You cannot go anywhere, because once your water breaks, and especially if we find meconium in there, you're not going anywhere. You have to be admitted. So that was definitely not what I wanted to hear or expected to hear. But then again, I'd accepted that my plan will probably not go as I want, and that was okay for me. So this was one of those things that I was just like, I have to let go and figure out how then to modify this experience and make it work for me. So I told her that, okay, that's fine. I just don't need any interventions right now. Let me just try and figure out this entire thing. And she was like, that's fine. We aren't going to do anything. So they just took me to my room. I changed into the hospital gowns and started my laboring process. So because of COVID, they also had restrictions on the number of people who can be in the labor room. I think my husband was a guaranteed number, or rather person. So I think they're only allowing 2 people in the room. But what would happen is that my moms, now my own mom and my mother-in-law, would interchange and come. Either they would be there with my husband or they're alone. So it was just, we can't all be in the same room at the same time. Also, because I was very into walking, because I thought that would help me go through the pain, because now the contractions have started coming back, I started walking. So I'd pace around the room. Luckily, I got like an ensuite labor room, so I'd walk around. But then I'd also want to walk around outside on the corridors. And I think I did it so many times without a mask on, and had kept being reminded to go and put on a mask. And that's how you know you're in the middle of a pandemic, man. So anyway, so they kept checking my progress. Not too much. Actually, I have to admit it. Like the process, or rather them allowing me to labor, they allowed me to labor at my own speed. And so there was very little intervention. Even just like their checks were not that often. But when they did check me, there was no progress at all. I was still at 3 centimeters. So I think the first check was around, other than the one I had when I got admitted at 9, the next one was around, I don't say 11, and still nothing had changed. And it was kind of infuriating for me, but I was really laboring well. And the other thing is, my room was next to the delivery room, so I could hear the women really, scream as they push out their kids. So in as much as my pain got intense, I took it in great strides, breathing, doing all those breathing exercises that I'd learned during birth class, telling myself it can get worse, it can get worse. You're still not there. Because I could see like my mom, first of all, she looked like a puppy that had been rained on, just staring at me. I felt like she couldn't help me. So she felt a little bit helpless and wasn't understanding how I was taking this pain. At 5 p.m., they come check. Nothing has changed. Even my doc is now here, and she's just like, this one, because of our limited time, now we'll just have to induce you. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. So they put in the fluids, because I knew time was running out anyway. It's just gonna get less safe. I agreed to that, and that's when things got intense. At this point in time, I'm getting contractions every 2 minutes. And I was getting mad. But again, taking it in, just breathe and go through the contractions. At 9 p.m., my timer had run out. I'm now going very close to points where the baby is at risk of infection. They check me, and I kid you not, there was no progress at all. So it's something that we had thought could happen. She was in the wrong position. Again, her head was down, but with how my pelvis was positioned, it wasn't really happening. The other thing about it is that during pregnancy, I had a lot of girdle pain. You can just Google that out. But it essentially what it is that I could feel a lot of tension and strain in my pelvis. I could even hear it grinding. I would even hear some noises from there. So I already had a feeling that my pelvis was probably not as flexible. I did everything. I was doing yoga. I was working, just trying to, open up that area, but clearly it wasn't happening. So whatever the case, it just reached this time, and I just looked at my doc and I was like, we're going to surgery, right? And she was like, yes, that's exactly what's happening. I was just like, okay, fine. Again, not going to what, according to the plan that I'd set out, but it's fine. There's nothing I can do about it at this point in time. I just want my baby to be here healthy. So I'd never done any major surgery before. So I was very, very anxious about that. They took out the meds, the inducing meds, but the pain still continued. It was still every 2 minutes, and I was hella mad. So I do the paperwork. At this time, I'm shivering also. I was really, really shivering. I think it's also a side effect of some of those meds and just my own anxiety. Like, it was just a mess. This guy comes to wheel me to surgery, and honestly, that had to be one of the weirdest parts of this entire thing, because he looked almost scary. He was really tall. He had a hairnet. He had some white gumboots. He had like a green overall. And they're putting me on this like woodenish stretcher. Everything just looked so morbid. Anyway, so we get there, and then I'm introduced to the crew that will be helping me out. Definitely the person doing the surgery is my gyna, so at least I know her. I'm comfortable with her. The pediatrician comes, introduces herself. She's really great. I tell her that since I'm not going with my glasses, please make sure you bring the baby very close to me so that I can see her. I can't be able to see her well. So I had to sit up so that they can inject me with like the anesthesia. They do a few tries, so I can't really sit still because, like I said, I'm shivering. I'm still contracting every 2 minutes. So I'm done. I'm tired because I'd been laboring for now we are 24 hours. So I remember this guy, I think, made a mistake or something because my leg shot up. So there was a nerve that was hit there, and then he tried it again. I really tried my best to just sit still, but yeah, so that happened, and then everything was just happening in a flurry. Yeah, that room is just crazy. I remember this entire time I was talking to my anesthesiologist. I'm not sure I'm saying that word right, but he was the one who was always on this side of the curtain. To ease the tension, I was just talking about the color of the room. I'm like, why is it this very weird green? Why is it not like the movies? Why is it not blue? Why are you guys wearing gumboots? Why is there rock music? Like, we were just trying to talk about everything other than what was happening. So he was trying to explain to me what I'd feel. And I remember feeling very confused as to why I'd still be able to feel them, because it's like, fine, the pain won't be there, but you'll be able to feel the pressure. And in my mind, I thought, if you put me down, or rather put some anesthesia in there, I shouldn't feel anything. In fact, my body should just be half. What's the point of feeling them work? Surgery starts. Like I said, I could feel them. I could feel them do everything that they're doing, but not in pain. Also, I had seen a lot of CS videos to prepare myself, so I had an idea of what's going on. So they tell me that the baby will be out really quickly, and for sure, she was. So when it came time to pull out the baby, I remember they even asked me to push. So later on, I thought that was for jokes, trying to mimic the experience of a vaginal birth. But a doctor friend of mine told me that sometimes actually that happens because the baby is really lodged up in there. You need as much muscle as possible, because we are also like guys at the top of my tummy just trying to push her out. Anyway, she comes out, she cries really loudly, and she was born at 10:34 p.m. at 3.5 kgs, really healthy lungs in there. So I started crying. Oh man, I wish I could bottle up that feeling, but it was something, I don't know if it's joy mixed with relief, mixed with this newfound love for another human being that you just birthed. Anyway, so she's taken to the side to be cleaned up, and then I tell my doctor that I'm starting to feel something, and at this point, it's not pressure, it's actually pain. In fact, I think I even told her that I feel like you guys are under my boobs. Definitely there's no way they were there, but I could just feel that it wasn't right. It wasn't the normal pressure that was going on. I think she notices something is wrong and then just starts barking orders. She's just like, show her her baby now. Man, I panic. I'm like, oh, this could be the last few moments of my life. Yes, show me my baby. So the pediatrician brings the baby, and I told her to bring her close, but she brought her too close to the point where I saw nothing. It was just, so she takes the baby away. Then my anesthesiologist tells me that, I don't know what he was saying, but I think he was just trying to keep me busy as he placed me under. So I went completely out and only woke up later in recovery. It was very, very dazed. And then when they noticed I was awake, they wheeled me to my room. So on our way to the room, man, I was very drugged up. I was very confused. And then I remember seeing both of my moms, and I was very, very confused. I think I even said, what are you guys doing out? Isn't there a curfew? Because like I said, it was the first lockdown. Curfew was at 7 p.m. And I know this is like, at this point, I don't even know what time it is, but I know it's late. So apparently what they did is that once my husband told them that I'm going to surgery, they just got into the car and came. They didn't care. They came to at least be there with him during that process. So I get to my room, told to try and sleep. So I wasn't able to really sleep well because I kept thinking that my baby is somewhere in this hospital, touching my belly, realizing that she isn't there anymore. And then in my line of view was this bottle of water that I could not drink. At least that's what I'd been told, right? So I kept just thinking about it, quenching my thirst. Staring at the side of my bed. My husband was curled up in a chair trying to sleep. I think he was asleep. He must have had a long day. But yeah, so I was very, very interested in seeing my baby, right? Because it was the first time we were separate. I think I finally fall asleep, and then it's morning and she's wheeled into the room. So it's the first time I'm seeing her. She was asleep, and then the nurse asked me if I wanted to hold her. I quickly said I don't want to. And just stared at her from afar. I made sure, is she hungry? Is she okay? And then she's like, no, she's fine. She's just sleeping. I was like, well, then I'll just wait for her until, she's ready. Because I think at this point I was a little bit scared of her. And then also I didn't feel that overwhelming urge to, hold her. Rather, the way they tell you that, once you see your baby, there's an instant bond. It didn't happen for me. It didn't happen. So part of my birth plan again was to have, some skin on skin time. But it couldn't happen. So I just stared at her from afar. And then she woke up, and then I held her to try and start breastfeeding. I couldn't imagine that I just gave birth to this girl. She looked exactly like her father, like copycat paste. It's just such a miracle that this child was here. So I realized that breastfeeding is not natural. It's an odd thing. But we tried. Anyway, so in the morning, these dogs, they come in one by one, trying to explain what happened in surgery. So I think the anesthesiologist is the one who came first, and so before things went wrong in surgery, he seemed very cocky, very arrogant and full of himself, to be quite honest. Like he had just been pulled out from a great night to come and do this surgery. I might be judging him a bit too much here, but that's how I felt, right? But then, because the man who came in the morning was very different. He was very apologetic. He said that it seems that he let me sit for too long as he was trying to put in the meds, so much so that they wore off during surgery, and that's why I started feeling the pain. Then my gyna comes, says the exact same thing. She'd never had that happen to her during surgery, so she was very, very apologetic about that as well, and said that, yeah, your meds are wearing out, so when you started saying that you'd feel like I was under your breast, that's when she knew that things had gone south and made the decisions that she did. So you know what, at that point I really didn't care too much. It was done, right? It was over. I'm alive, my child is alive, we're okay. I just had to recover, so I just told them that's fine, but let's just move on. I remember that first day, the pain was intense, like from the surgery, but I had a great group of nurses. Like the nursing care there was really, really great because they helped push me to understand what I can do and what I cannot do. So, being able to just get out of bed, enter and have a shower, it even change out into clothes. It sounds very little, but it was a lot. So we get moved from the labor room to a ward. So maternity ward was full, so I had to go to a different place. So at this point in time, my baby couldn't necessarily stay in the nursery. She had to stay with me. I remember there's this lockdown, right? So nighttime comes and I tell my husband that he has to go so that he's not stuck here. I didn't know that he can actually stay. I wish someone had told us that, because that first night was the shittiest night I have ever had because I am in pain from the surgery, right? My baby did not enjoy being dethrobed for diaper changes or even just being touched. She would scream so loud, like the nurses would come and check if I'm okay. I don't know if I had the loudest kid out there, but it was intense. Man. And then, so they brought me the things to change the diaper. So those a set of diapers and cotton wool, and I already knew that I was going to be using cotton wool because it was part of the discussions in birth class, but I didn't realize that I needed water for the cotton wool. So this the first time she pooped out that black gunk that they do. So I was there with the cotton wool just trying to dab this out, and it would just stick. It was just the stickiest mess ever. And I'm bending, I'm trying. Anyway, I figured out I needed water. So I got some and cleaned it out. And then I was also not sure about this breastfeeding thing either, because every time I would feed her, she would still scream afterwards. So I would kept asking the nurses to come and top her up. So they would top her up with like glucose water. And I remember feeling like such a failure, because I thought, it's just because they kept coming and pressing my boobs and telling me I have milk. Then I'm like, why isn't the baby seeming satisfied? But I think it was more than just satisfaction. I think for her, it was even just like this entire new place, right? So definitely she had some quote unquote teething pains. But that first night was just the ghetto. And then the nurses come in the morning and they ask me, oh, why didn't your husband stay over? I'm like, what do you mean? Was that an option? So the second night he definitely stayed. The room was big enough for him to be there and get a place to sleep. It got easier a little bit. I was really, really tired because I hadn't slept well since that night my water broke. And I think all through that hospital stay, I really didn't. I was just in a daze. By the end of the hospital stay, I thought everything was going well, fine. I hadn't figured out that breastfeeding thing, but she was feeding, so that we can sort out later on. Little did I know that my main problem was still to come. So I get discharged, I want to say maybe on a Tuesday. That day, everything seemed fine. I was happy to go home. I felt odd coming back into my house. All of a sudden, I felt like my house is really, really cold. But anyway, so I just had to adjust to life. I'd been set up at station for food and things like that, uji, then jahes and all that stuff to be able to produce enough milk. But then what I noticed is that my tummy was just going bigger instead of getting smaller. So it was getting so big. So this is like maybe the next morning. It was getting so big that my belly button started disappearing. That's how big and intense it was getting. And I was like, this doesn't seem normal. So I take some pics, send them to my gyna, and she immediately sends out a prescription for me. I think she was just like, I think you're backed up, so we need to give you some sort of relief. So after a couple of hours, I told her it didn't help. And I wasn't even passing any gas. Like, it's like everything was just growing in there. And she told me to just go see her the next day. It's definitely not normal. Again, not something you want to hear. The next morning, we prepare ourselves because you have a whole crew now traveling with you because you're of the newborns, right? So there's a baby, there's my husband and my mother-in-law. So I had no clue how long that day would be. I wish I had an inkling of an idea, and then maybe I would have better prepared myself even mentally. I thought it would just be an in and out. Right, so we were there very early in the morning, and then I was actually very anxious to be traveling around with a newborn, barely 5 days old, with COVID in the air. She can't wear a mask. I'd also never packed up a diaper bag before, and I realized later that I didn't pack wipes, and it was still those days for that black poop. So don't even ask me how we changed that diaper. I shuddered just at the thought of that. So anyway, my milk also hadn't come in the way I thought it should. I didn't have the engorged breasts and just milk shooting out, because that's what I was expecting. So I was very anxious about that. Thought I needed some time at home to be able to build that up. Going outside, definitely not ideal, but again, I didn't have much of a choice. So we go to the doc. She listens to my stomach and realizes that it's really, really silent. So there's no gas movement, no nothing. It's just very silent. So she ordered an x-ray, and it showed that I had constipation right up my colon, not even the rectum, colon. So everything was clogged up and no gas was passing through either. So definitely this would have to be something invasive for them to try and pull out, and it can't happen there. So she seeks a second opinion and refers me to a doctor friend of hers who has like a day surgery center. So it's like 2 p.m. now. I'm so over this thing. I'm hungry. I am tired. I'm high on hormones, high on painkillers. The receptionist was really nice, but I didn't think she was treating it as urgent as I was. I kept pacing around because I'm still in pain from the surgery. My legs are swollen up. My baby is downstairs in the car. I'm very anxious about that. I would go to the loo and just start crying. I think guys thought I must be nuts or something, but I would just cry. Oh my god, I would cry so much, and then come back to the waiting room with like red eyes, and my husband is just there trying to like comfort me and tell me that everything is fine. I kept sending him to go downstairs and look at Keo, and Keo was asleep. She was asleep this entire time. In fact, I feel like she was asleep the entire day other than me breastfeeding her once. She gave us the grace, and she was just asleep the entire day, just chilling in the car with my mother-in-law. Man, anyway, I get into the room closer to I want to see maybe 3:30, 4 p.m. I don't know. And then the procedure starts. So it wasn't pretty. I don't think I'll go into those details because I myself don't know what happened. And Morothi was in the room, but even he hid behind the curtain because he didn't want to see that. But ideally what they had to do was just like try and nudge all that back up to try and see if I can find some relief. So man, it was so that had to be one of the lowest points in this entire process. Because the other thing that was happening is that I think because of all this anxiety that I had, my milk came in and it was just soaking my gown. So now I started shivering from that cold. And it reminded me of that shivering that was happening in that operating room. I felt so guilty. Because I was just like, why is my body failing me? Why am I not able to be there for my little one? You know, this is not the welcome that she deserves. At the end of it, so now it's like getting to 6 p.m. I still hadn't found relief. My husband is now properly irate at this point. He calls my gyna and literally tells her off. It's just like, you told us that this would help, right? Even the doctor you sent us to was not here. It's people who are doing some weird things to my wife. You know, like he went crazy. So it was 6 p.m. You know, with the curfew looming, the place had to be locked up. So we had to leave and come back the next day. I remember going home. I just held my baby in my arms and I just cried. Yani, I was crying then, just holding her tight because I felt like such a failure and a bad mom. You know, for her to be spending one of her first days in life stuck in the car, you know. Anyway, so we went in the next day, met the doc in charge at least, and told him everything that was going on. And he prescribed a less invasive course of treatment and it worked. I think maybe it was also helped with what had happened the day before, but it worked. So we realized that this entire thing was caused by, it was a side effect of my painkillers. And also the other thing about me is that when I get anxious, I do get backed up. It's just how it happens. It's either I get that or I diarrhea. It goes either way. So it also happened like that week of my wedding. So I think from the trauma, I didn't realize I had a little bit of trauma from the surgery, at least mental wise. So it didn't help. So it changed up my painkillers to paracetamol. Wouldn't be as strong, but it would be fine. I was just like, I can deal with that. I went back home. I think ideally everything should have been back to normal, and it was. So I kept a very strict food diet and a diary as well, making sure that I didn't eat anything that would cause me again to back up or leave me gassy. Next 2 weeks, I reported every poo or fart that I made because it was a sign of progress. But I cleared out, and by the end of the week, I could see my tummy starting to recede. But like I mentioned in the first episode, like it got very scaly because I think it got really, really tight. You know, not even the pregnancy tight, like really, really tight. So around my belly button, like I could finally see it. It came out, and then the skin around it just got very, very scaly. But you know what? At that point in time, I was just very, very glad to be over it. This next part of the story happens, I'd want to say, the second week after I'd given birth. It's essentially going to talk about my earlier struggles with breastfeeding. When I was in the hospital, the nurses told me that I had enough milk. They would come, press my boobs, and a clear fluid comes out. I thought it was supposed to be yellow. I don't know where I got that idea that first milk is yellow, so I wasn't too sure about it. What would happen is that I would not feel very confident in the milk that I had because my baby would still be a little bit fussy after a feed. And in hospital, at least I had nurses around and they would come and, if needed, give a top up of glucose water. So when I came home, I realized I do not have that luxury of glucose water. So the morning, I think it was, so that morning when we had to go to the clinic for me to get checked up, I tried to breastfeed and it was really painful because I couldn't necessarily hold her across my arms to, place her next to the boob because of this extended tummy. So it was just getting that much harder to do. And I could see that she was probably not getting enough. Also, like I'd said earlier, I thought like my big milk hadn't come, I hadn't had this engorged breasts that was just spewing out milk. What we decided to do, because we knew we had to be on the road, was buy some formula. I sent Morothi to get some. He came back with formula and we looked at this can and I kid you not, we didn't know what to do with it because I didn't know if I was supposed to use mineral water, boiled water, tap water, and then I think because we were also sleep deprived, tired, I was jacked up on painkillers, hormones. I couldn't interpret the manual. I didn't understand how to make the formula. In hindsight, this should be part of birth class or preparation. We are given information about breastfeeding, but there's very little, I feel like. At least I didn't interact with a lot of information about formula. And I think it would have been helpful to just know what to do when I get a can of formula. So we started arguing about how to make this formula and how to interpret that manual. That my mother-in-law just slowly picked up the can, went into the kitchen and figured out how to make it. Well, me and Murothi just literally argued about the same thing. But anyway, so she got that formula, she drank, she seemed satisfied. So at least I thought it's great that I have that on hand whenever I struggle with this thing. Fast forward a little bit. Now we're in the second week. My tummy issues have been resolved. I have figured out breastfeeding, but every time she would latch on, it would be painful. It would be so painful, the point that I would shriek out. And I'd also started pumping a little because, I'd been told that would also help my milk flow. And I noticed that in as much as I was putting on nipple cream and all that and taking care of my nipples, I still cracked. I could bleed. So I had a very negative experience with my fast pumping sessions, at least those first few, because I would see like blood was also coming out. I really struggled with that whole idea, and I also understood why people would give up on breastfeeding, because the pain can get intense and you have no idea when that pain would end. I wish someone had told me like in a week or two it would be over, because when it was over I felt great. But anyway, I think what actually helped me was this lactation consultant who came over, to my surprise, and I'll explain why. So my mother-in-law had been seeing me struggle with this breastfeeding thing, and she sought out a second opinion. She talked to one of her sisters. She's a doctor, and she also happened to be very good friends with a lactation consultant who I think also helped her out during her own time. So what my auntie did was she went to Biashara Street, bought me more nipple cream, and came with the consultant. Now, I had no idea all this was happening until my mom-in-law comes into the room and tells me that, I've watched you struggle a little bit with this, and I have done something that you might not like. So at this point in time, I'm like, what? Because what had happened is that, so she shared this idea with my husband, and my husband told her that I would not be happy being ambushed in my house. One thing about me is that I'm a very stubborn person. I realized that I had an issue with this breastfeeding thing, and I knew that I had to figure out how to properly latch her. So I was practicing a lot, and it was getting better. So I felt like I had that in check, but I think my mom-in-law also saw that I probably needed a little bit more help. So my husband tried to tell her that if they come, I don't think Sally would be super ecstatic about that. So what she'd come to my room to do was try and soften my heart a little bit and accept some help. So in my mind, the way she was talking, I thought I will allow for that help later on. In my mind, I was just like, maybe the weekend, we'll call them over. But then she's like, no, actually, they're outside. I'm like, what? How do you mean outside? I was caught off guard. So I started crying and being like, oh man, this wouldn't have been the best way to do it. And she acknowledged that. She knew that. She said that Muruthi had told her that was probably not the best approach, but she couldn't do anything else. She felt like she really needed to get me help. So I'm just like trying to find a way out. I'm like, could they come tomorrow? At least I'll be more prepared. Even just mentally, I don't even think I'd showered. Like, those first weeks where you're just a mess. So I just accepted, and they came in. They were very respectful. Everyone kept their distance because, again, newborn, COVID, and all that. Even my auntie, I don't even think she saw the baby, and she apologized. She said that, I know that this was probably not how we should have done it, but Shiro, who was the lactation consultant, helped me so much that I think you need it. So please just give it a try. So I'm introduced to Shiro. We go to my room and then we start talking. She didn't even say much. She just asked me how things were going and I broke down and cried. Actually, the theme of this entire episode is just how much I cried. I sit there and I start just bawling my eyes out, telling her everything, how much of a whirlwind this had been, how crazy that birthing experience was, the struggles that I was having with the constipation, and ties that down with my issues with breastfeeding. So it almost felt like a therapy session, and she was a really great listener and really understood where my problem was. After she listened, she also apologized for how they came into the house. And then also explained what she does. I don't think I'd known at that point that there were lactation consultants. I just thought, like every other first time mom, you think you'll put your baby on your boob and they'll know what to do. She started explaining what she does and how to latch her baby. She showed me some nice tricks that I hadn't thought of that would help Keo approach the boob better and get a better latch. You know what they tell you for a perfect latch is that the entire areola almost has to enter the baby's mouth, which logistically I couldn't see how, because her mouth is so tiny. And during pregnancy, like the areola, that's the black part around your nipple, is so huge. It just grows. So I couldn't figure out how the entire mouth should fit. The entire areola should fit into the mouth. But essentially, she just showed me like what I should be looking for in terms of like Keo's mouth. And luckily at that point in time, Keo woke up. She wanted a feed. And she was like, okay, this is great. I think we can experiment and try. So I pick Keo up and using her tips, I try the first time. It doesn't really work. Keo gets frustrated and just starts screaming. And then she was just like, this is a perfect time to put her on your boob because her mouth is wide open. And I did. And oh my, for the first time through this entire breastfeeding experience, I did not feel any pain. I did not shriek as she was on my boob. I think at that very moment, everything felt worth it. Like them coming and helping me through this, no matter how stubborn I was, completely felt worthwhile. Because I could see Keo just like latch on that boob and just pull that milk. And she was satisfied. She really enjoyed that. And I learned various ways to put the baby on the boob. Sometimes my stubbornness can be hurtful to just me. So it was really great that I allowed that experience to happen. I actually ended up thanking my mother-in-law for that. It came from a good place and I needed that. I think I kept off pumping for a while still, giving my nipples some time to rest. But in the meantime, I was using a Haka. So a Haka is just like a, I don't know if I'll describe this well, but most times they call it like a silicone manual pump. When your baby is breastfeeding on one boob, you stick it on the other, because the other thing that happens is once your baby is breastfeeding on one boob, the other one still produces milk and lets it out. So it can get quite messy. So this Haka kind of just catches it. And because of the suction, it also just pulls out a lot of milk. So I use that a lot. I was able to store so much milk that way. And they call it an essential for every new mom out there. So I think by that time, I was feeling very confident in this entire thing. I was still extremely sleep deprived and now getting into what we call the fourth trimester. At least with my body in check, I was able to now focus on everything else. And it was hard, really hard, because you're struggling with sleeplessness. You're struggling with a crying baby. I remember there was a time she was awake during the day for 7 straight hours. Oh my. I didn't realize that an overtired baby is a baby who won't sleep. And when they don't sleep, they get more tired. So it's just this vicious cycle. That day was torture. That day was proper torture because she only settled down for a nap, her sleep rather, at like 9 p.m. and was awake 40 minutes after. So it went on that way for the entire night. So you get to this point where you feel so overwhelmed, like proper overwhelmed. I don't even think overwhelmed is a word that encapsulates what this feeling is. I remember just sitting down on my bed and just blankly staring at my cupboard, just wondering, how am I supposed to do this? What should I do? How should I feel? How everything just felt so big and overwhelming, and like I couldn't hack it. It was hard. It was hard. I mean, I had a great support system. My mother-in-law couldn't stay for too long, so she left. But my mom would keep coming over, and I had a nanny at that point, and she was great. She was actually the same nanny I had when I was a child, from like class 7 there. So she came to help me out for a while and then left when Keo was 3 months old. My husband was a great help. After his paternity leave, he was still working at home. So we equally shared everything. Even at this moment where we felt completely overwhelmed, at least we were together. I remember he printed out the Serenity Prayer. And if anyone knows my husband, they know he's not the most religious person on earth. So, and I think that time we just called it spirituality, because you realize with all that's happening at that point in time, there's a reason people try and find comfort elsewhere, because your brain is not able to really be in that moment. It just feels too much and you need extra strength from somewhere. And that Serenity Prayer for us was that. It was great. It was exactly what we needed. For those who don't know what the Serenity Prayer is, so the Serenity Prayer says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference. These few words were everything that I think we needed those first few months to just accept and move on and try our very best, trying to, adjust to this new person in our lives. Also, I think I talked about on my Instagram in detail about how we started putting her on a schedule, on a nap and feeding schedule from when she was around 2 to 3 weeks. It took a while to pick up, but by 2 months, everything seemed, at least for feeding and naps, it seemed very consistent, very predictable. I was using Gina Ford as a resource, and I know Gina Ford can go here or there with many people, but for me, what I gathered from there was a lot of, at least the timings, those were great. And then understanding how to troubleshoot some things, that was also really great. There's some things I just leave out. But it helped me so much so that by the time she was 3 months old, I felt very comfortable letting my nanny go. And we've been hacking it, just the two of us, or rather now with Keo. She helps out sometimes, the three of us. Since then. So that foundational 4th trimester was something that at that moment I probably didn't appreciate or like very much, but in hindsight now, it was necessary for us to be where we are now. So I think that's the end of my story, because I nothing else is standing out in my head. If ever something else comes up, I'll probably slot it in somewhere in the middle of another episode. The other thing that I kept doing, at least for my own good, was take pictures of my stomach to try and see it going down, especially after the whole, extended thing with the constipation and stuff like that. And it did, at least the scaliness or the dryness around my belly button eventually cleared. I think it cleared, I'd want to say 6 months postpartum. It really took a while. It just reminded me that Keo coming here was not a walk in the park. It was hard, but definitely worth it. Thanks again for listening to this. So I think I've completed the first part of my story. So episodes from here on now will be talking to other people. So if you want to be part of the podcast, please let me know. You can hit me up on Instagram at Sally Mogore. I have also created an email address for this podcast. It's mamatilspod@gmail.com. You can just send me a message there and we'll organize how to record your story. Thanks again for listening, and catch you in the next episode. Bye.